Hi, I'm Poppy. I'm going to talk to you about my anxiety. So, I usually get anxiety attacks or panic attacks when I'm just about to go to sleep. So, it's the point in which I'm lying in bed and I start to kind of overthink everything and think, oh gosh, all my brain's going at like a million miles an hour, but it's not actually that specific point, but it's leading up to the point in which I'm about to go to sleep. But going from awake to sleep, as you slip into sleep, I feel like that is me dying, which sounds so silly, but it really feels like my body's kind of giving up and I'm dying. So can you imagine? I'm sure you can imagine that being awful, because every single time I go to sleep, I feel like that's my body dying. So I get shortness of breath, I start to panic and get very dizzy and disorientated, and my heart starts beating irregularly and heart palpitations and feels like it's coming out of my chest. And when I'm really tired, it's really difficult because, when I'm really tired, it's really difficult because I'm so exhausted. But every time I slip into sleep, I kind of jolt myself awake to try and kick-start my heart, if that makes sense. It sounds so irrational, and I realise it is so irrational, but the physical symptoms are so real. So I'm just thinking, maybe I am dying, and then I panic and jump out of bed to try and kick-start a system that I think I have any control over. But it was quite funny because my friend said to me this afternoon, when I was telling her about it, I haven't seen her for a while, she was saying how it was quite sweet that I thought that I had any say in my death, which was quite funny, and I'm quite glad that she said that, because it just makes me think, what am I talking about? But it is just very complicated, because I know it's so silly, but because the physical symptoms are so obvious, like I can't breathe, I feel like my body's dying, I feel like I'm about to have a heart attack. I'm finding it very difficult to go to sleep, because every time I go to sleep, I kind of jolt myself awake. So it's like I drop off and then just jolt myself awake again. So I think I need to stop my head going at a million miles an hour and think that really I don't have a say in my own death, quite frankly, but I would really like some help, if possible, in trying to cope with that anxiety and cope with the irrational fear that I'm going to die every time I go to sleep, because I'm really tired. Please help me. I hope that's what you needed to know, because, yeah, that's it. Irrational fear of death in my sleep. Please help me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm going to be talking to you about my first session with Dr. Daniela Rossi. So immediately when I got there, I felt quite at ease within the first couple of minutes, because she was so lovely and kind and friendly. So that was really nice, because I've been to a lot of places before where you just don't feel comfortable with the person, and so then it's quite difficult to explain quite difficult things to them. But so that was really nice, because I knew I'd be relaxed and be able to speak to her openly. So we first started by going back to the time and when my anxiety first started, and what was going on then, what stressors may contribute to the fact that it started, such as family life, relationships, my university work, other stressing situations which have contributed to it. And then I worked around some family life, family history, because I worry about my health a lot. So I was just trying to see where that came from, and what, if my family had some issues with their health, maybe that's why I also worry a bit. It was nice to make a mental map of my anxiety as well, so I could kind of relate everything to each other and see how it came about and how I could work on each section to move forward. So I'm really looking forward to the next session with her, because she was really kind and really helpful, and I feel very positive about it. Thank you.
Hi, in the next session we went over how I feel a threat is happening, and I perceive that thought, which turns into an anxious thought, so I experience anxiety, which then brings on physical symptoms, and then my response may be irrational because my brain has kind of created my body to produce these physical symptoms, and then I act upon them. So it's about thinking about my brain creating a scenario and then it turning into something that feels quite real. And Daniela taught me how to try and ride the wave as opposed to fight it, because you can't ever stop a wave. You have to kind of just learn to go along with it. So don't avoid the situation, but learn to cope with it when it does arise. And you can do this avoidance or distraction technique. I can sometimes make a problem a lot worse, and it turns into like this vicious cycle that's not real. So a way to combat this is through breathing, which I found was really, really helpful, because breathing's so simple in the way that you do it from birth to death, and if you ground yourself and use it as an anchor, it can be really helpful in difficult scenarios. So that can prevent the mind wandering off and concentrate on now and not be distracted by other things. Another analogy she used, which I found really, really good, was that I was the rider on a horse, and my brain was kind of the rider and the horse was my body, and I've got to learn to ride the horse, control it, but not fight it, because in effect it's the horse that's going to get me to places. So I need to learn how to control that and work with it as well. So I hope that makes a bit of sense.
Hi. So in the last couple of sessions, we focused a lot about imagery and how our brains are so amazing in the fact that they can just create these scenarios, create these scenes. And if we can create those scenes, we can also create scenes of calm as well as anxiety. So most of anxiety is created by myself in my head. And if that is true, then surely I can create the opposite. I can create the calm sensations and realise that it's all a figure of my imagination. And because I have quite a vivid imagination, an extensively vivid imagination, I find it very easy to kind of snowball with things, and until I'm getting into a state where I'm really anxious, really not feeling good. And it's about learning how to kind of prevent that snowball from happening, but also perhaps snowball it into a positive thing. And recently Dr. Rossi asked what I can control in my life, and it took me a little while to take that in, because I just couldn't think of anything that I could really control in my life, because you can control some things, and for example, if you controlled someone else's actions, that wouldn't be a positive thing. I wouldn't say that I could do that, but I just thought about that kind of thing. But I really couldn't think of anything that I did control. And then we came up with that you can control what you say, and you can control how you act to a certain extent, obviously, because emotions are very powerful, and sometimes they can control you, which is possibly what is happening in a lot of these cases where I'm really anxious. So to some extent you can control your mind in how it acts, but you can't control how it creates things and the imagery that it forms by itself. So you kind of have to learn to accommodate those images and consider them and realise if they are valid or if they are a bit negative and not going to help you in any way. So one of the images that we created, she said, when do you feel like you were so scared but also you had some pleasure from that too? And I said when I went skydiving, because I always say it's the best thing I've ever done in my whole entire life, but I also say that I was absolutely terrified. And we use that because when I was up in the plane, I was absolutely terrified watching people jump out of the plane in front of me. And then when they said, "Are you ready?" I just kind of went, yes, but I wasn't really, but I wanted to do it. And I mean, I couldn't really get out of it by that point. So I was terrified, but as soon as I let go and jumped out of the plane, my emotions went from fear to elation, and I had an amazing sensation all over my body. It was incredible. I was so happy. I laughed all the way down. So we kind of use that because I have anxiety associated with sleep. You can relate that very much so, because when you're about to go to sleep, you could say that that's before I was jumping out of the plane. I was anticipating what was going to happen and creating these scenarios which are snowballing out of control. But once I'd let go, once I jumped out of the plane, and once I had gone to sleep, it was a feeling of bliss, happiness, and contentment. So, in effect, skydiving is like sleeping. And that is a very interesting way to think about it. So initially you're scared and anticipation makes you anxious, but once you let go, you'll be more than happy and feel so grateful that you did. And we did another imagery exercise where Dr. Rossi asked me to imagine a nun, imagine a person in the army, and imagine a jazz singer. And the nun I imagined her obviously to wear nun clothes, and I actually acted out, Dr. Rossi told me afterwards, that I acted out each character with my hands. So a nun, I said she was very tentative. She thought about every action she made and was quite quietly spoken and a bit reserved. Whereas the person in the army was very assertive, very commanding and sure about what they were saying, and had a kind of straight up appearance. And then the jazz singer was more flamboyant and laid back and happy-go-lucky kind of person. And I imagined all these different types of clothing, the way their mannerisms were, their character, their faces, their smiles, their hair colours, their eye colours, their shoes, the scene that they were in. And my imagination to create all that from one word is quite fascinating, really. I find it so amazing learning about the brain more. And surely if we can create such vivid imagery, we can also create calm. So then I was asked to think of a really safe place that I had. And my safe place was walking the dogs in the river, where there's a riverbank, and up the bank there's this field which the sun hits it so perfectly. And the trees are really green, and I can hear the wind and the birds and the river and my dogs running around. And I love lying on the grass and just feeling the grass and looking at the sky. I'm quite a whimsical person. So that was my safe place. And so if I can imagine all these things off one word, surely when I'm anxious, I can try and go back to that safe place and try and remember all the feelings and thoughts that I had about that place, and try and harness that into that present moment where I'm feeling anxious, to relieve some of that and feel the feelings of calmness that I had in that place. So sleep is essential for us. It's important to let go and to regenerate the body, and it's so important, and I've realised that I can do it. It's all up to me and my little brain.
Hi. So in the last session with Dr. Daniela Rossi, we went over everything that I'd learned in terms of thinking about the way I think, the way I breathe, trying to harness my emotions and not let them run off with me, trying to anchor my anxiety. And I can quite honestly say that I can sleep like a baby, which is very surprising. And I was a bit sceptical to begin with, because I just thought, well, how can I possibly just sleep by talking to someone? But I am so thankful. I'm quite sad not to see Dr. Daniela Rossi again, because I can't thank her enough. I can actually sleep at night really well, and I've learnt to control my anxiety and not let it control me. And I think that's a massive thing to say. And I can't really quite believe that I'm saying it, but I'm cured. Well, you know what I mean. In terms of sleep, I am so thankful. So we looked at the way that my brain works, the way it processes things, the way it creates false scenarios to give me a physical response to my anxiety, which then makes my brain react to that physical response, which is the anxiety. And I've learned to control that, not let it run off with me, and to realise that it's just something I've created. It's not reality. And I am so thankful, and I would recommend her to anyone, and I already have anyway. So thank you so much. I'm really, really grateful for being able to sleep.